Connecticut East This Week is supported by CT Examiner, a multi-award-winning online newspaper covering stories from across the state, from politics to business, health, education, and the arts. For just a $20 annual subscription, CT Examiner will let you know what's happening where you live. ctexaminer.com, reporting and supporting what matters. Drones are being used for everything from delivering goods to amazing light shows. And now they're being used to help improve agriculture and the lives of farmers and the crops they grow. Plus, we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. We've all become normalized to the use of drones in our everyday lives. They are used to deliver packages in large cities and have become an addition at firework displays, creating amazing light shows in the sky. They have many different uses, and now here in eastern Connecticut, drones are being used to help farmers and the agricultural industry to increase the yield of their crops and decrease the use of expensive fertilizers and pesticides and more. Joining us on the podcast is Jim Smith, co-owner of Cushman Farms. We are at one of the facilities here today. We're also joined by Mike Quick, who's co-founder of Almanacs, of which, Jim, you're also involved as well. How did this venture come about, Jim?
It all started actually through a relationship with my wife and Michael. Mike used to work at an elementary school where she taught at, and we got hooked up through that. He was interested in working with drones, and I had a keen interest also in it. And through that is how we really got started, and it's been a positive relationship since we did.
And how long ago was that?
Well, we've been working at this probably about 3 years now.
So, Mike, tell us your involvement in this. Jim's told us how you got involved. It's sort of blown up since then and going well, I hear.
Yeah, definitely. I've been working with drones since about 2016, but it was more so on regular mapping, creating digital surface models, real estate type stuff. But over time, although I saw the growth of drones in agriculture, there was never a use case for it in this area. The barrier of entry is pretty high, so you have to have a farm of a significant scale, like Jim's, to be able to actually see the benefit of some of that technology. So 3 years ago, we started talking about this type of tech, and then we started deploying it for mapping specifically in the last few years, doing a lot of data collection, and now we've been ramping up since then.
Talk to us about that price factor as well, because, of course, the drones are not cheap to start with. Now they've become almost out of reach because of sort of the way the tariffs are. You know, these are not your average drones. I mean, these are big old beasties, aren't they?
They are quite large. And even the small ones, the type of sensors that are on them make them cost prohibitive for most farms in Connecticut.
And what sorts of things can they do? They seem to be multi-use. I mean, you were talking obviously about mapping, but they can do so much more, which is the incredible thing about this technology.
Yeah, absolutely. So the smaller ones, those are mostly mapping and scouting, things like that. The larger ones, though, you can spray, seed, spread all sorts of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides that farmers would need.
So, Jim, talk to us about that, because farming equipment generally isn't cheap either. I mean, that's a big resource for a farmer. And as we said, these still don't come in cheap. So how can farms afford this? Because I understand it's a service that you're going to offer. Is that correct?
Correct, right, and that's exactly how they'd be able to afford it. We charge a fee for whatever services or different services that we are providing, and hopefully be able to handle the larger capital and investment and to have a business like this available.
What sort of reaction have you got from the farming community? Because a lot of people who aren't involved in farming don't realise that farming is not like granddad's farming anymore, and it's not been like that for a long time. There's a lot of technology that's used in farming these days, and obviously this is a perfect use case as well. So what have some of you farming community people been saying to you about?
So I think there's a lot of positive reaction to it. I think they're looking forward to seeing actually what it can do, and I think as this coming year will be a lot better as we get into the process of using it, demonstrating it, and providing some more insight into what the can actually do. This year would have been a perfect year with the fall we've had, and actually it was the late spring, getting corn in that actually delayed us this fall. And if we could have seeded a lot of the cover crops prior to chopping this year, we would have had a lot better stand. So there's a lot of advantages that we can do with these tools that we can't without.
Something that Jim and I have spent a lot of time talking about is not just the farmer's reception to it, but the public perception of it as well. We've spent a lot of time talking about how a lot of people are generally disconnected with the food system that brings them their milk, their corn, their whatever else that they need. It's not just the farming perception, but also I'm learning there's a lot of public perception to help with this as well. So to teach someone the benefits of drones and precision agriculture, you first have to get them to understand where they've been coming from with traditional farming for quite a while.
Do you still find it, both of you? Because farming's been around here in Connecticut for a very long time, but like you said, Mike, people's perceptions, for some reason, they don't seem to think that we do a lot of farming here in Connecticut, and that reality is completely wrong.
That's absolutely true. I think it's easy to feel disconnected when you can walk into a store and buy your strawberries for $3, and maybe 6 years ago, buy your strawberries for $8, and just walk out of the store and not think twice about where it came from or the process to get there. Some of the perception from the story that we did about a month ago here, people were concerned, like, oh, why do we have to spray more pesticides on crops? But the reality is, doing it with this way, you're actually spraying a lot less, and it's controlled.
I was going to say, you did a demonstration, and it wasn't spraying. I think it was seeds that you released from the drone. And it was from somebody who knows nothing, and I am a layperson. I know nothing about this stuff. But watching it from a distance, you could see how very controlled that was. That must help to reduce waste as well, I'm guessing, Jim, because do you get a lot of waste sometimes with some of this type of activity?
Absolutely, yeah. No, so we could actually control a lot, especially when it comes to pesticides. We can control a lot of the area that might not have to be sprayed. Generally, when we walk into a field with a big machine, you're going to spray the entire field. And it takes boots on the ground in order, and mapping and so forth, in order not to do that. The drone is very efficient at that. We can identify where those weeds are, calculate what they are, go out and spray just that one spot that needs to be attacked.
Yeah, Mike, talk to us about that, because we're looking at some data capture, so like images while we're doing the interview. They're very colourful. What are we looking at?
So a lot of traditional methods, and what's even being used today out in the Midwest, is satellite-based. But the benefit of drones is that you can get a lot lower, and you can get a lot clearer imagery into either distress of the plants, maybe it has disease, maybe it didn't fill in as well as it needed to, maybe there's compaction in certain areas, or runoff from different like storms or things like that, or just elevation of the land. And all of those things can be informed by consistent data capture. So when you build this out, this is obviously a 2D map that we're looking at here in the room, but if you look at this on a computer, you can view the 3D version of that as well. So then there's tools from the Army Corps of Engineers and other open source tools where you can model how water will go over that terrain, things like that. So there's a lot of different things that we can use to inform it. But this one specifically, Jim, do you want to talk to why the specific rows look the way they do?
Yeah. So this is actually, it's a picture of the plot field where there's different varieties, different stages of different growth, and that's why you see the difference in height. There's a relatively new technology coming out in corn seed, those real shorter ones. Unfortunately, your audience probably won't be able to see this picture, but the two real short ones are simply a short corn variety where we can actually gain, the corn only grows to be about 8 foot tall instead of 11 or 12, and the ears are closer to the ground, making it more balanced as a plant. So if we do get a hurricane, a little more protection of being blown down. And so that's new technology coming out, and that's shorter. The leaves are actually compacted in that plant, so the yield drag or the less yield is not there.
And just to help the listener, we're looking at a very interesting map, and the one that Jim was referring to has got definitive lines on there, and it's absolutely incredible just looking at the detail of that. And then we've got another image here which is more colourful. Can you just explain this one for us, Mike? This one's got like lots of multicolour. We've got green, we've got orange, we've got red. So what, is this some sort of heat map type thing?
Essentially, it's infrared data that's been normalized. So it's a very standard index called NDVI. And that's been used for about 30 years, from helicopters to planes, satellites, things like that. But the usual resolution that you see is sometimes half meter to several meters, but with a drone, you can get down to half a centimeter. So when we're looking at this on a computer zoomed in, you can see individual leaves on plants. And for example, there was another field where was a cucumber that was growing in. On this map, you can see the red, which is just general, either like gravel around the edge or dirt in between the stalks. But it can also mean when it gets to orange, some sort of distress, or maybe it didn't have as much water in it as well. It's a general indicator of relative plant health. But in the other example where there was cucumber growing in, when we mapped that field, for example, it was bright green in a certain area. So when you normalize that data and look at it, the image here that we have on the left, for example, if it was in there as well, you would see on the bottom, it would be lit up like a neon light, just all green, and that's extra growth underneath the corn as well.
So this obviously gives a huge amount of data. And is it fairly easy to interpret sort of thing? I mean, obviously there's software involved in this, but I mean, obviously it's useful data.
Taking the myriad of data and winding it down to a -1 to +1 range and adding a color scheme to it makes it easier to interpret. It's green is good, red is bad, so it makes it pretty simple to follow. But translating that to the prescription map of how much you spray in certain areas, that has obviously a lot more involved in it. But the new technologies around AI, being able to take this and put it into a AI model that's looking at what these need specifically versus what they've needed in years past, that's where that long-term data is valuable. When we have 3, 4, 10 years, once we get out that far, that'll be really valuable.
And how often are you sort of like doing mapping as well? I'm guessing it's not just a once a year thing. Give us an idea of how often you're mapping when you're doing this.
So there's how much that we're doing this for research purposes, and then there's what the average farm would need. We've been doing at least once a month on this field, and then another one up the road, and then other ones sporadically. But these ones, at least once a month. And we're doing that at a very low altitude as well. We're taking up terabytes of data at a time, which is several hundred movies worth of storage space at any given time. But like I said, we're specifically going for more research. Realistically, if you're doing this for an average farm, maybe 4 times a year would be fine.
So this is obviously part of that collection that is going to be useful moving forward, not just for this farm, but I'm guessing for other farms.
Absolutely. And that's really what I'm trying to get into when we're doing the over-excessive scanning that we've been doing here is what's that point of diminishing returns? How low is low enough where you're getting as much quality data as you need before you get too low and then you're just taking up extra storage space that you don't need to really be taking up.
The nice thing about that data is as we collect that year over year, we can accelerate the reduction in how much pesticides and herbicides we need because we'll know exactly where to target, and we're reducing that seed bed that's in that soil.
Did you come across any little aha moments since you've been doing this? Because often these things can reveal stuff which, as you say, isn't available to be seen by the naked eye. The technology is so much more clever.
There was a couple that came to mind for me. The first of which was, I think it was the first year we were doing this. Right in this field, there was an area of compaction. Mm-hmm. And when we mapped out how big that was, it was just way more than I would have expected just a tractor trail to be. The other one is the differences in, I don't know if you'd refer to it as topsoil, but comparing the surface levels year over year, how much that changes year over year from rain and whatever else is pretty drastic. And then even just in the maps on here, when you drive by a cornfield, you just think, oh, it's going to be pretty solidly corn all the way through, but which sounds ignorant, I'm sure, to most farmers listening. But in the corners of these maps that we're looking at right here, just the amount from, I'm not sure what caused that specifically, but either erosion or the slope of the land or whatever it is, that's a significant amount lost.
What we're looking at in these pictures are wet spots in those fields. And if we remember back to what the spring was like, that's what that was referred to. And then in some areas, different fields also, what you'll have is just a field that over a couple of years, you're going to be able to determine, okay, this spot doesn't figure out where is this area. And as we go to fertilize that, well, maybe we don't put as many inputs into that area because we know we're not going to get the crop out of there no matter what we do.
Yeah, I was going to say, because, I mean, you've mentioned about pesticides, but then, of course, there's fertilization as well to keep that soil so useful for the work that you need to do. Talk to us a little bit now, though, about this technology. I remember from when we did the story originally, China is the one that makes the best agricultural drones. And as we said, that's now become an issue because of tariffs against that country. I recall there was a suggestion that maybe America starts making its own agricultural drones, and you guys were saying, well, we can do that.
We can and we should. That's what we're in the process of working on now, is the design and build process of a prototype for a U.S.-based agricultural drone, just a heavy lift drone in general. There's several considerations with that. There's the supply chain. There is the fact that most sensors and chips come from China, the fact that avionics and things like that for these drones are already in China. Conveniently, the helicopter was invented in Connecticut. The aerospace supply chain that we have in Connecticut is pretty dense and robust. The machining capabilities that we have as dense and robust in Connecticut. So we are uniquely suited to build these, and that's ultimately what we're working for.
How do you go about that? It takes funding, it takes time, you need a production line.
It's a twofold approach here. The first is we already do have drones from the manufacturers that make them today. Realistically, it's great tech. There's nothing wrong with the drones themselves. They are likely to either be priced out or banned. The FCC just voted to retroactively give themselves the ability to ban licenses for the frequencies that they're currently operating at. So that's a concern. Last year's, I believe it was the National Defense Authorization Act, they said that by this December, if no agency has done a security review of DJI, then it's banned automatically, and as of now, no agency has started that. So there is concerns that they'll be banned in the future as well, and now the concern is retroactive banning of existing ones. But for what's here is 92% of Connecticut farms realistically are priced out of procuring these drones. They could if they wanted to, but that's that point of diminishing returns for them where if they don't have a certain amount of acreage, it might not be worth it. So step one is providing this as a service to farms who need it. And then over time, like we have been the last few years, working on building out our own prototype. Prototyping is a little bit easier. You don't need as much as a clean room and stuff like that. But testing sensors, testing motors, testing motor drivers, things like that, that's relatively easy. And luckily not as costly as building a clean room.
And we're just going to mention as well, you use the word DJI. That's the actual manufacturer in China. That's the company, isn't it? So just in case people were wondering what the DJI was. They make all sorts of drones as well, I believe. I think they do a lot of cameras, and they're quite a high-tech company, aren't they?
They purchased the camera company Hasselblad, and they've been making a really incredible tech on the consumer side and enterprise side as well. There's a couple other large manufacturers of drones, but in China as well, but they're the large ones by far.
And Jim, from an investment point of view, clearly you see the value of this. You've been doing this, as you said, for the past 3 years with Mike and co-founded this company. Where do you go next? Is it a case of saying to the state, hey, you need to help support this?
Absolutely. I think it's definitely going to the state and asking for some help and investment in a business here in eastern Connecticut where we provide a bunch of jobs and support the community.
What sort of reaction have you got so far? Because recall when we did this original story, there were representatives, there were state and also there was commissioners here. So clearly there is interest. Is it a little bit difficult because session's out, so like people are not as easy to get hold of at the moment? So has it slowed down a little bit talk-wise?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. The meetings are getting set up. Maybe I'm just a little impatient also. I want to get going, but...
well, that's totally understandable. Growing food doesn't stop, and trying to get this type of thing going, often it can take some time. As we round this out, just give us a sense of where you want to try and see this maybe in the next couple of years.
Just like Jim, I'm impatient myself as well. So it's a few things that I'd like to see. Number one is we already have seen a lot of support and interest from the state. They've been great partners to work on so far. It's been much of a marathon, more so than a sprint. And obviously, if anyone listens to the news, there's a lot of competing interests and initiatives right now going on in general. But we've seen that support, and you use the word value case, and I think that's important. If we are to receive any sort of help or drive in creating jobs, there needs to be the value and the return there for the state to do so. So that's what we're working on now. And where I'd like to see it go overall is next year, by this time, we should ideally have some prototypes flying. So that'll be step one. And then to a 3 to 5 year plan is really scaling that out. The challenge that we're working through now is we do have that supply chain in Connecticut for machining, avionics, all that kind of stuff. But the reality is that it would be faster, cheaper, and easier to fly to Silicon Valley, get investment by the end of next Friday or the Friday after that, have all the engineers we need in one place, but we don't want to do that. We're both residents of Eastern Connecticut. We want to have that here. We want to bring those jobs here. And that's something that both of us are not willing to compromise on. We're going to do that here. So it's going to take longer, and that's what we're working on.
And I think there's that whole business aspect of being here, smaller farms. It's the right place to kick this off.
And also from the manufacturing point of view, we have over the last couple of years really been pushing the manufacturing here. So hopefully, and it has been here in Eastern Connecticut, we've got an organisation called eWIB, which has been helping with the manufacturing pipeline. And no disrespect to electric bows, but obviously they do have a high demand for people, so they are rather nabbing a lot of the future's talent. But it's definitely here. And yeah, we've already shown that this part of the state, which often gets overlooked, actually has a lot to offer. And certainly from the agricultural point of view, it's probably one of the larger parts of the state from an agricultural point of view. So hopefully these state leaders will start to listen and look more into this. It is an absolutely fascinating business that both of you have come up with. And like I said, it really does make people who, like me, have no farming experience realise that it is a big deal, and certainly our food supply is another big deal as well, because without farmers none of us have anything, so there'll be nothing on the supermarket shelves.
If I may, in regards to bringing manufacturing to Eastern Connecticut, like you said, we have electric boat, but if I may, we would bring manufacturing back to Eastern Connecticut. This is something I've been super passionate about for a long time. Places like New London, Norwich, Willimantic were once manufacturing powerhouses through the rail lines, through the different industries that were here. The first illuminated factory by Thomas Edison was in Willimantic. 3 presidents at different times have visited Willimantic for campaigns, manufacturing excellence, things like that. So we have the facilities, and due to Electric Boat and a lot of other machine shops and stuff, we have the workforce. It's connecting them through things like this.
We wish you continued success, and let's hope that the legislator and Connecticut understand the value of this and making us understand that farming is the future of manufacturing, or could well be the future of manufacturing here in Eastern Connecticut. Jim Smith and Mike Quick, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
And if you're a farmer or in the agricultural industry and are interested in the services of Almanacs and their drones, then head over to their website at almanacs, that's ALMANAX.US.
Brad Gazan, on Atlanta United, we know everyone has a ritual, a habit we never skip, to clear our minds and elevate our performance. But what do you do to keep your head in the game? Because being your best isn't just about taking care of your body, it's about taking care of your mind and mental health. Discover the resources you need to keep your mind focused and your mental health a priority.
Find resources at georgia.loveyourmindtoday.org. Brought to you by the Huntsman Mental Health Institute, the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation, and the Ad Council.
Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week, supported by ctexaminer.com, reporting and supporting what matters. Governor Lamont was the keynote speaker at the 59th Connecticut Conference of Municipalities Convention held at Mohegan Sun's Expo Center recently. Lamont spoke on many issues and didn't shy away from talking about the recent new housing bill he signed into law during last month's special session.
We came to a place that was a reasonable compromise. And I think we came to a place, I'd like to think, I hope that on a bipartisan basis, I have a lot of mayors and first selectmen say, thank you. It's not perfect, but it's progress. And it's something I can work with going forward. And I appreciate folks that listen to me. And if I have to fine-tune some things and change some things to make sure they work for you, that's what we do. That's how you work together.
Around 1,200 municipal officials from across the state attended the convention. Lamont said with all the uncertainty of the federal government and the economy, he's trying to protect Connecticut as best he can.
We do have $3.5 billion in reserve, but you got to understand why it's there. Because I learned a lot from 2017 and 2008 and 9 and 01. A lot of people think, oh my God, recessions are over, nothing we have to worry about again. That's what they said in 1929. And I got to make sure that I can hold you harmless, or at least do everything I can if there was that recession, to make sure that you don't have to slash education, don't have to jack up taxes, maintain core municipal supports. That's what that rainy day fund is for.
CCM is the state's largest non-partisan organization of municipal leaders, representing all 168 towns and cities in the state, and helps advocate for them at the state legislature. The Connecticut Office of Early Childhood announced increased access to early childhood education in southeastern Connecticut recently. Interim Commissioner for the Office of Early Childhood, Elena Trueworthy, explained where the funding was coming from.
We passed historic legislation this past session to establish the first early childhood education endowment. And as a result of state funding, in southeastern Connecticut alone, since July, there have been 210 new childcare spaces funded in this region, as well as an additional 13 new Smart Start classrooms, totaling 195 spaces projected over the next 2 years.
Trueworthy said one of the things they will be offering is low-cost or free childcare, but that won't be happening until 2027.
The idea with the endowment is it's like a savings account, and we need to build it up in order to be able to spend the dollars that we can spend. And so we needed these 2 years to build capacity to get the system ready in order to be able to offer that free childcare and at low cost childcare.
Connecticut currently has a need for 40,000 childcare spaces across the state, and Trueworthy said they hope to expand by 20,000 spaces by 2032, which would double the state-funded system as it currently sits right now. The state has put aside $300 million so far in the endowment and is spending $35 million in 2025. The fund will be replenished using excess funds the state has each year from the budget. The Early Childhood Education Endowment was passed by the legislature in the 2025 session. The Long Island Sound Partnership and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation have announced nearly $12 million in grants to organizations and local governments to improve the health of Long Island Sound and its wildlife populations. The grants will leverage more than $8 million in matching contributions from the grantees themselves, resulting in more than $20 million in total conservation impact for projects in Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, and Vermont. The grant money will be used to prevent hundreds of thousands of gallons of stormwater runoff and almost 3,000 pounds of nitrogen pollution entering Long Island Sound, restoring 70 acres of coastal habitat, and launch a new oyster restoration effort, among many of the other projects. In the City Examiner this week, reporters Ali Lamaster and Amy Wu report the newly elected Groton City Council approved another $1.25 million towards finishing construction on the Shore Avenue seawall, a project expected to have cost overruns of close to $10 million. Recently, the council unanimously voted to approve a purchase order with Arborio Construction and transfer $1.25 million from its capital fund balance for the completion of the seawall replacement project. The $1.25 million is needed to finish sidewalks and carry construction over to the spring. The seawall replacement project, which went out to bid in 2014, has faced numerous obstacles and growing concerns about cost overruns. The project was originally expected to cost $2.7 million, now is expected to cost $12 million to complete. Construction on the project began in May 2024 and was initially expected to be completed in December of that year. And Francisco Uranga reports that the Old Lyme Board of Selectmen voted to call a December 16th referendum to extend the budget for installing sewers in the town's beach communities, but the proposal came with a warning that the town's taxpayers could be on the hook for a significant portion of the costs. It's a message that's largely at odds with how most believe the costs will be shared or not between property owners in Southview and Area B, the three private beach associations involved, and the rest of the town. The reason? A reading of State Statute 7249, which caps the costs for property owners to no more than the increase in property values from installing sewers. All property owners in Old Lyme, beach residents or not, will be eligible to vote in the upcoming referendum to extend the project's budget. Two appraisers hired by the town in 2020 estimated that residential property values could increase between 7 and 10% with sewers, while commercial properties would see a jump between 10 and 15%. You can read both of those stories by visiting cityexaminer.com. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.